So, how do you put your shoes on before your socks?
Oh,
I
man.
mean, it sounds like
My
a
shoes.
bad riddle, or maybe something a toddler asks you when they're desperately trying to stall bedtime.
Yeah, exactly.
But today, for you, the learner, we are actually going on a deep dive that takes this exact, seemingly impossible question, and we're going to use it to completely dismantle our understanding of global geopolitics.
Right, and economic structures.
Yeah, and honestly, human cognition itself, it gets pretty wild.
It is a remarkable leap. I
Yeah.
mean, we are looking at a text written by an author named Shui Feng, and this was published on February 12, 2022.
Right.
And the whole thing was actually prompted by a random netizen on the internet
Mm.
who just threw this absurd footwear question at him. They were probably, expecting a joke in return.
100%.
But Shui Feng, he treats it with this absolute piercing sincerity.
Which is honestly my favorite kind of source material.
Yeah.
The kind that starts incredibly small, almost trivial, really, and then it just explodes outward into something profound.
Oh, absolutely.
So the text notes that Shuifeng couldn't answer the commenter immediately because he was running errands or something.
Yeah, it's just outliving his life.
Right. But then he sits down the next day, gathers his thoughts, and he reveals that putting on shoes first is actually the fifth item in this broader philosophical framework he created.
Right. He calls it the 18 items of unconventional thinking.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because his very first solution to this so-called impossible problem, I feel the need to push back on it right out of the gate.
Sure, go for it.
Because Jifeng says the first way to solve this is to just, simply swap the names.
Yeah, just switch the labels.
Right. You call the physical shoe a sock, and you call the physical sock a shoe, and bam, just like that, you've put the shoe on before the sock.
Problem solved, right?
I mean, no. I have to challenge this. Isn't that just a cheap semantic parlor trick?
I get why you'd say that.
If I point to my bicycle and confidently call it an airplane, it doesn't suddenly sprout wings and fly me to Paris, you know? How is changing the vocabulary a legitimate solution to a physical problem?
No, that is a completely fair critique. And on a purely physical level, yeah, it totally feels like a loophole.
Right.
But to understand Shui Feng's framework, we really have to look at the deeper cognitive layer he's exposing here.
Okay, I'm listening.
He's proving that our very first barrier to solving impossible problems is our rigid, like almost religious attachment to preconceived labels.
Oh, I see. So you're saying the words themselves are the first cage we build around a problem.
Precisely. Words shape our cognitive boundaries. We
Yeah.
suffer from this kind of linguistic lock-in.
Linguistic lock-in.
Mm.
Wow.
Yeah, so by suggesting we just swap the names, Schlesing is demonstrating how quickly we let language dictate reality rather than letting reality dictate language.
Right, because we just accept that a shoe has to be called a shoe.
Exactly. It's an exercise in mental plasticity. Before you can manipulate the physical world to solve some massive crisis, you have to prove to yourself that you aren't a prisoner to the labels you were taught as a child.
It's like stretching your brain before a heavy workout. You have to prove you can bend the concept before you bend the material.
That's a great way to put it.
But still, as a reader, I'm left wanting a tangible physical solution.
And he delivers one.
He does. He says if redefining the words isn't satisfying enough for you, then we have to move on to redefining the physical materials we just blindly take for granted.
Right. This brings us to his second and third solutions, which actively challenge our assumptions about what shoes and socks are actually made of.
Yeah.
He introduces this fascinating concept he calls the 1,000-year world.
1,000-year world. I love that phrasing. It sounds like some sort of sci-fi utopia.
It essentially is a utopia.
Yeah.
He uses that term to describe a highly evolved futuristic paradigm where human design has eliminated all arbitrary complexity.
Okay, so what does footwear look like in the 1,000-year world?
Well, in this world, footwear is totally unified. There is no separate concept of, like, a rigid leather shoe and a woven cotton sock.
So it's just one thing.
Exactly. There's just one single, versatile garment designed for the foot.
So how does that solve the riddle?
You take one of these unified garments and you put it on your foot. Then you take a second identical garment and layer it directly over the first one.
I get it.
Yeah, in this scenario, the inner layer inherently functions as the shoe and the outer layer functions as the sock.
Even though they're the exact same material.
Right. Their sequential placement defines their role.
Hmm?
Therefore, you put the shoe on first, then the sock.
That is wild. He just completely dissolves the boundary between the two objects.
And then he yanks this concept right back into our current everyday reality with solution number 3.
Right, because right now we are completely trapped by the assumption that shoes must be hard, sturdy, and unyielding.
And that socks must be soft, thin, and pliable.
Right, so he flips the material properties entirely.
Yeah, the hotel slipper method.
Yes, the
Yeah.
hotel slipper method. He points out that, not all shoes are heavy work boots.
No, definitely not.
What if you take a soft, highly pliable shoe, like one of those flimsy fabric slippers you get in a hotel room, and you put that on your barefoot first?
Okay, shoe goes on first.
Then you take a highly flexible, incredibly stretchy sock, and you simply stretch it completely over the soft slipper.
What's fascinating here is how accurately he identifies the root of our frustration.
Totally.
Human beings create their own unsolvable problems by assigning immutable, permanent properties to things that can actually be changed. The netizen who asked the question assumed the rigidity of a shoe was like a law of physics.
It is exactly like an escape room.
Oh, that's a good comparison?
Have you ever done one of those with a group of friends?
A few times, yeah. Always stressful.
Right, and you will get completely stuck in a room for 30 minutes because you're staring at a book on a shelf, and your brain says, that is a book. Books are for reading.
You assume the object can only be used for its everyday conventional purpose.
Exactly. But the moment you realize the book is actually like a wooden lever disguised as a book, the secret door opens.
Yeah, you only fail the room when you assume the materials around you can't be repurposed.
You're trapped by your own assumptions about the material properties of the props in the room.
That is a perfect analogy.
Mm.
Zweig is basically telling us that our lives, and in fact our entire societies, are just massive escape rooms.
And we keep treating levers like they're just books and then wondering why the door won't open.
Exactly. But he doesn't even stop there.
Because maybe you hear the hotel slipper solution and think, well, that's just a compromise.
Right, you might think you've downgraded the shoe to a flimsy slipper just to make the trick work.
So Su Feng offers a fourth physical solution. And if changing the material feels like a cheat, this final solution requires us to dismantle the very architecture of the object itself.
He suggests we make the shoe detachable.
Here's where it gets really interesting. He proposes engineering an entirely new modular system.
Right.
Imagine redesigning a sturdy, hard shoe so it has a zipper running completely along the top.
Okay, picture that.
You put the base of the shoe on your bare foot. Then you unzip the top of the shoe, fold it back to expose your bare foot, slide the sock onto your foot, and then zip the hard top of the shoe back up over the sock.
Wow. So you've officially put the shoe on before the sock while maintaining the complete structural integrity of a hard, functional shoe.
It's brilliant. I mean, we are no longer just playing with words, and we aren't compromising on material.
Right. We are actively deconstructing the architecture of the problem and engineering a structural bypass.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the zipper method isn't just about footwear at all, is it?
Not at all. It is a gorgeous mechanical metaphor for how we must approach massive, seemingly intractable societal problems.
Because when a system isn't working, you don't just throw your hands up and say it's impossible.
Exactly. And you don't necessarily have to burn the entire system to the ground either.
Right.
Sometimes you just have to unzip the rigid outer structure, address the vulnerable core issue inside the barefoot, so to speak, and then reassemble the structure around it in a completely new way.
And that pivot brings us directly into the macro-philosophical payload of Schuigzing's text.
Yeah, this is where it scales up.
He essentially asks us, if we can deconstruct a shoe this many ways, what else are we falsely limiting in our daily lives?
What else are we assuming is a rigid law of physics?
Right, and this is where he introduces his core thesis, which he calls the rule of 64 possibilities.
This is the crux of the entire text. Schuigzing asserts that every single phenomenon, every conflict, every situation, or everything in the universe actually has exactly 64 possibilities.
64.
But as humans, we get trapped because we artificially limit our thinking to familiar knowledge.
Which almost always defaults to a binary.
Exactly. We only see two options, plan A or plan B, completely ignoring the other 62 possibilities.
Now, I have to stop you there because the first time I read that, my immediate thought was, wait, why exactly 64?
Yeah, it sounds super specific.
Is that just a random number he pulled out of a hat to sound impressive?
It's actually not random at all. Though, to be fair, he doesn't explicitly give a history lesson in the text.
Okay, so where does it come from?
Given Schuigzing's cultural context, the number 64 is a direct nod to the I Ching, or the ancient Chinese Book of Changes.
Oh, okay, the I Ching.
Yeah, the I Ching uses a matrix of exactly 64 hexagrams to represent every possible state of existence, transition, and change in the universe.
Wow.
It's
Okay.
a philosophical and mathematical framework that suggests nothing is static and every situation has a vast but structured set of permutations based on how different elements combine.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. It's an overarching symbol for the complete matrix of change.
Exactly.
But I still want to push back on the practical application of this.
Sir, lay it on me.
I get the theory, but in practice, isn't mapping out 64 possibilities for every single conflict completely paralyzing? I mean, if a government has to respond to a crisis, or if I have to make a split-second decision at work, we don't have the time to sit down and evaluate 64 different matrices.
Hey, nobody has time for that.
How do we actually use this without overthinking ourselves into a total standstill?
That's a really crucial distinction to make. The rule of 64 isn't meant to be a daily operational checklist.
Okay.
You aren't supposed to draft 64 action plans before buying groceries, It is a diagnostic tool for when you are fundamentally stuck.
Ah, for the impossible problems.
Yes, it's for those moments when you feel trapped in an unsolvable binary that is causing you suffering or leading to a dead end.
When both option 1 and option 2 are disastrous.
Exactly. Reminding yourself that there are 62 other permutations forces your brain out of its panic state. It demands imagination.
So what does this all mean in the real world? Like, how does he apply this to actual geopolitical crises?
He gives some incredibly potent examples. Take China-U.S. relations, for instance.
Oh, that's a big one.
Huge. He asks why the world assumes this massive, unimaginably complex geopolitical relationship must solely vacillate between two extremes.
Right, either total cooperation or total confrontation.
Yes, it is always framed as a tug of war in the media.
Yeah.
We're either best friends holding hands or we are worst enemies on the brink of war.
And Feng points out that by accepting that binary, we leave 62 other potential diplomatic approaches completely ignored on the table.
We artificially restrict global progress because we lack the imagination to see the spectrum between the poles.
So what would one of those alternative approaches even look like? How do you break that binary in reality?
Think about a strategy of hyper-compartmentalization.
Okay, hyper-compartmentalization.
Instead of treating the relationship as one giant monolithic switch that is either on or off, you unzip the structure.
Just like the shoe.
Just like the shoe. You might have a scenario where the two nations are in aggressive, ruthless economic competition regarding artificial intelligence. But simultaneously, they are operating a fully integrated joint task force for global climate engineering.
Oh, wow. So it's not all or nothing.
Exactly. Or perhaps diplomacy bypasses the federal binary altogether. You might see subnational alliances like individual U.S. states forming direct, localized trade consortiums with specific Chinese provinces.
That is fascinating. You literally break the monolith down into modular pieces, just like adding a zipper.
Yeah, and he scales this concept down to our personal lives, too.
Yeah, because he asks why human relationships must strictly be categorized as acquaintances versus strangers.
Or relatives versus foes.
Or, moving into societal structures, the strict division of rich versus poor.
He recognizes that binaries are cognitively easy. They are comfortable.
Good guy, bad guy. Rich, poor, shoe, sock.
Exactly. It takes real caloric mental energy to sit down and map out options 3 through 64.
And relying on that cognitive laziness is exactly what traps us in unsolvable cycles.
Yes. And Feng takes this anti-binary framework to the absolute ultimate macro level.
He goes huge with it.
He really does. He scales the conversation up to the trajectory of human civilization itself. He goes right for the foundational pillars of modern society.
He asks if we really must adhere to the binary of the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie.
Or if everything in the world has to be violently categorized into this is yours versus this is mine.
Right. He even questions the grand economic narratives we're all born into, the ones we treat like gravity.
He asks, is human society strictly forced to choose between capitalism and socialism? Is communism the only destined future for humanity?
And just to be incredibly clear for you listening, Feng isn't trying to champion capitalism or advocate for socialism or communism here.
Right.
And neither are we. We are definitely not taking a side on which specific economic system is morally superior or practically better.
Exactly right. Our role here is simply to act as a mirror for the philosophical argument that the author is presenting.
The text is critiquing the binary nature of the choice itself?
Yes, it's critiquing the fact that we've limited the entirety of human progress to a strict either-or menu.
So if you only look at capitalism and socialism as your two absolute choices, You are just trying to force a hard shoe and a soft sock together and screaming that it doesn't work.
You haven't bothered to invent the zipper yet.
This raises an important question, doesn't it? How many of our historical global conflicts, how much of our systemic despair is simply a failure of imagination?
That is the big question. By locking ourselves into a generational death match between System A and System B, what miraculous, unforeseen System C are we completely failing to invent?
What would a System C even look like in that context? I mean, if we aren't just blending the two, but finding an entirely new possibility out of the 64.
It could be something we barely have the vocabulary for yet.
Like what?
Well, perhaps a globally decentralized, resource-based framework where baseline survival needs like housing, food, healthcare are managed by open-source algorithms for maximum efficiency,
Ah.
while at the same time technological innovation and creative pursuits remain aggressively privatized and fiercely competitive.
Oh, that's an interesting mix.
Or maybe it's a society built entirely on decentralized autonomous organizations, where the concept of a centralized corporation or a centralized state both become obsolete simultaneously.
Right, it's totally outside the normal binary.
The point isn't that one specific alternative is the guaranteed answer. The point is that the alternatives exist, waiting to be engineered.
That is the real tragedy of conventional thinking. When you believe there are only two options and both are causing friction or suffering, you just feel trapped.
You really do.
The 18 items of unconventional thinking is ultimately a framework for hope. It's a reminder that the cage we feel trapped in is built entirely out of our own limited assumptions.
We are holding the wooden book, and we just need to pull it to open the door.
It really highlights the power of taking a simple premise seriously. By refusing to dismiss the internet commenter's riddle as a joke, Shuvim revealed the artificial boundaries we place on our own reality.
Once you realize the options are there, the impossible just becomes an engineering problem.
So to bring this incredible intellectual journey full circle for you today,
Let's do it.
we started this deep dive with a literal, seemingly ridiculous question about footwear. And through relentless deconstruction, we ended up dismantling the geopolitical, social, and economic binaries of human civilization.
It's a profound shift in perspective.
It really is. So the major takeaway for you, our listener, is this. I want you to think about a binary in your own life that you've just accepted as a law of physics.
We all have them.
Maybe it's a conflict at work where you think it's either my way or their way.
Or maybe it's a career choice where you think you have to choose between making money and doing what you love.
Exactly. The next time you hit a wall and feel violently forced into an either choice, take a breath. You aren't actually stuck.
You really aren't.
You are likely just trying to force a soft sock over a hard shoe without considering a zipper. You just need to step back, break your assumptions about the materials you are working with, and go hunt for the other 62 options.
They are always there, waiting in the periphery.
But before we let you go, there is one final provocative thought we want to leave you with to mull over on your own.
Oh, I like this one.
It's something that builds on Weffing's text but takes it one step further. The author asserts that there are exactly 64 possibilities for any given phenomenon.
Right.
But what happens when two people, each operating with their own unique, deeply complex set of 64 possibilities, sit down at a table to solve a problem together?
Do those two massive sets of possibilities clash, panic, and collapse back into a simple, comfortable binary because it's too much to process?
Or do they multiply exponentially?
Hmm.
Does 64 times 64 create 4,096 entirely new, previously unimaginable ways forward?
It's quite the thought.
We invite you to keep exploring those unseen intersections. Because tomorrow morning, when you wake up and reach for your clothes, you might just find yourself looking at your shoes in a completely different way.